They would take it back. They take it back to whatever house where you came from. I bet you take it back.
Good evening, report to order the Board of Trustees work session for June 30th, 2025. Half the year's over already, can you believe it? Continue the review EV stations on the residential garages. As you remember, after that fire up at Up Hill, I had brought it up if we could not allow electric vehicles to be in parking garages. And council researched it and said no, they're allowed, but we don't have to allow the charging stations to go in there, correct? So that will kind of help that along. You want to brief us on the memo you gave us?
Sure, it tells you, the memo I gave you, again, just examined certain provisions of the New York State Residential Building Code, and it was defined as electrical vehicle charging stations and where they can be located. So you can, residential garages, those situated in buildings are considered buildings, so they are subject to this law. But, they
Is your mic on?
Yep, now it's on, sorry. So, under this, they have, for example, the parking garages have to be, there has to be mixed separation. They tell you, what is required when you have an EV station, what's not required in terms of, for example, I'll give you, they say EV charging stations are, they give you some examples of where it's regulated, where it's not. So an EV charging station, parking garage is regulated because a parking structure is defined as a building of the code. A parking lot driveway, an EV charging station that would not be subject, that would be subject to uniform code of the executive law. So again, the memo just highlights, when you have an EV charging station in the building. Again, some municipalities, I know like across the river where I do some of this stuff, they don't allow EV charging stations underneath a parking garage where the residence is above it. They just don't want to see it. But again, that's a local determination, local call. But there are regulations with respect to separation between the residential and the actual parking structure. So that's what I gave you as a sample.
I mean, I would think that if somebody has an electric vehicle and they bring it home, they want to plug it in at night because that's the most of the time they can charge it. Some people have the luxury of charging at work.
That's okay.
No.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that, let's go back to any of our structures that have the parking garages underneath, where I came up with the idea to suggest that was, if I have an electric car, I'm probably going to plug it in at night more than I would during the day. Some people don't even have places to work to plug them in. So if we don't allow the charging station under the garage, the chances are he's not going to park under the garage because that's where he has the charger all the time. So if my colleagues agree, would that be acceptable to then make a local law where charging stations can't go in under parking structures?
You can do that. Again, for example, I've seen situations where they have, I'm doing one right now, where I'm doing 150 unit residential multifamily, where the town is making you put the charging stations outside, not underneath the building. So, and they're doing that in their codes, by local law, because they.
Isn't that considered a more restrictive code compared to New York State Building Code?
Yeah, it is, and you can always go more stricter, you can't go less, you can't go more, but you can always go less. And that's a local law.
Yeah, but that needs to go to the state for ratification, and you need data.
Well, you could put it outside. They don't want it under the building. That was the whole issue. So, and they were able to, because again, I'm the one working on the project, and they specifically don't want the charging stations underneath the ground, under the building. Because they have 150 units on top, and they're concerned about it. So they told me, put your chargers outside, and that's the planning board's making me do. Under their law.
The state code says you can do it.
You can do it. State code says you can do it.
Do what?
You can install chargers under the ground.
Right, but you can also not.
You can also not, and that's
So,
local.
Fire chief, just to bring up the speed, after the car fire under Knob Hill, I said, oh, thank God it wasn't an electric vehicle because it would burn the place down. Because you just can't put that out in a timely fashion. So I had asked if we can not allow electric cars in parking structures. So this is where we're up to speed now, that we can't stop the cars from going in, but we cannot not allow the charging stations. So my thought would be is if the charging stations aren't there, they won't park. I mean, it'll help, I'm not sure somebody might do it sometime, but if the car needs charging and there's no charging station, they will plug it in at night outside. Right? It might be more better, just a little bit is better than nothing, right? I mean, am I thinking right about not having them in as parking structures?
Yes.
Electric cars?
Yes, we're dealing with a situation now up in General Office. We've got 2 floors that have charging stations in the center of the building. And in Nashville, just recently, they had a fire in the parking garage, and the 5th floor collapsed onto the 4th floor. So it's a serious concern.
So this might help.
This would definitely
I
help.
mean, so put it this way, it's the best we can do, right? I mean,
Out in the open, and then we just have to worry about smoke. Let it burn and worry about smoke.
Yeah, and just to, Mike, Tony's point, yes, so the state has to be aware whenever you're modifying it, but I know on the other side of the river, in other places where, I know I heard it rejected in a couple places here, but sometimes the general rule is you can always go more restrictive than the state, you can't go less restrictive. So the state provides you what you can do, so you can't do less what the state says. The state says it's, you gotta be, let's say, you have to have sprinklers in the building, you can't say you can't have sprinklers in the building. But you do have to notify the state, and they have to say yea or nay on that local law, because it's a building code issue.
And I've been down that road with another law we tried to pass here, and it's horrendously difficult, next to impossible, to get anything ratified unless you have data supporting it and calculations as to why your municipality is different from all the other ones in the
Or,
state. I mean, it's one thing for a planning board to put it out as a condition,
Yeah.
and if the applicant doesn't argue, then the planning board said do this. But
We
to
have
make
Article 78, they'll bring Article 78 and
Right.
challenge it. Right.
Right, but to pass
yeah,
the
but
laws.
there's also a good chance, like Tony, that's a good point, there's also a chance that the applicant's coming in and we throw it out there that they would bend on that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you want the project built.
Because the new code coming out is gonna require any new home to be equipped for, charging stations in the garage, starting, I think, next year, end of this year, next year.
Well, I mean, there's not a problem with that, that's not, the issue in my case was, you had, like I said, the single-family home,
Yeah,
no issue. It was, because they're concerned about fire safety and fire issues in a multifamily building. Now, you have like 5 stories, because my instance is 5 stories, and you have, like I said, underneath is, you have at grade and below grade with charging stations, that was in the original plan. The town didn't want it, they maybe redesigned, well, not me, but my team redesigned the plan, to have all the charging stations outside, because they didn't want, the fire department chimed in and said, listen, we don't wanna have that issue, right? So they made the condition, we have to put it outside now.
I mean, it's an old complex, and Tony in the building department, X many years ago, re-looked at the project, and things have changed since it was built. And one of them was what's the rating between the garages, and they changed it. Thank God they did, or that, if it was before, it would just fire would have went right up through that
Yeah,
place.
that's the separation I was talking about. the code.
Right, so I mean, now there's a better separation, requires more different sheet rock and et cetera, whatever's in there. But now it's better, but if there was an electric vehicle, I mean, no disrespect to fire departments, we all know that the fires just don't go out. And now they sit there and burn for a long time, and that structure could seriously be compromised.
And again, I'm just telling you from my developer's hat, the projects that I'm doing right now in other places, they're making me put these outside. Because the fire department, in every jurisdiction so far, at least 2 out of the 4 projects that I'm working on the multifamily side, they didn't want the charges. Again, I'm not talking about single-family homes, I'm talking about multifamily structures, they want them outside.
Well, I mean, I'll ask
And by the way, at the time, the clients were like, well, we're not gonna argue, they could, there's a conditioning of getting past secret, getting past
Correct.
preliminary, so we
right,
did
9
it.
times out of 10 they won't, but
Right.
still, yeah.
But can they challenge it? Sure, to Tony's point, which is right on the money, right, they can, because the state says, no, I can't have it on the ground, but again, it goes back to, you have the state, and you have your municipal power and your own rule. So that's, but 9 times out of 10, they're not gonna argue that.
So I'll ask my colleagues in a second for the 2. One would be is if somebody comes in with a site plan, we try to convince them not to do it. And B, maybe you guys can work on trying to get that into our local law, if my colleagues agree. You following?
So, figure yourself,
What's that?
is Erica figure yourself in the appeals?
Yeah, but this, if you're passing a
This is
law,
different,
it
but I'm
goes
saying
over,
she's doing the
it'll
appeals.
go straight to the, yeah.
You guys okay with it?
Yes, I agree.
All right, so we'll keep that in mind, so then after we comes in, we'll try and steer them in the right way, and if not, if you guys work on, see if we can adjust in the local.
Okay.
Again, I think,
Well, we'll draft the local law first. and then
Right, and send it to him.
Run it by them, and see what happens,
Right.
before we get too involved.
right. Again, if push comes to shove, if the developer, if they want to fight back the planning board process, they can say, listen, state code says I can do this. But if it's part of a, site plan is always, so the planning board, it's a back and forth, give and take. So if you want to condition that approval on having them outside, I guess, the folks I represent, for example, will probably see to that request to provide this other relief somewhere else.
Yeah, since none of them have them now, could you, even though the complex are built, can we stop them from adding them?
You have nothing on the books where to stop that.
Not today, but if we do that, that'll be also for nobody that has it.
Yeah, but again, the state has to, okay,
No, I get that point, but I mean, is it okay if we try and they
Sure.
say yes, but I mean, even though the complex is built, that's something new.
yeah, anything, again, the law will be prospective, obviously, you can't compete for new projects, or even this old project, they want to put charges on.
Unless you make make the statement that it would be a site plan amendment to
Right.
add them, and they have to come to the planning board, and then the planning board.
Correct.
Chief, you like that concept? Yep. Are you all right? There and see what comes back. We'll discuss the complete streets planning from the county, Mike?
So the county has put a new program together where they're going to attempt to fund some, what they're gonna consider complete street projects to make municipal streets, I'm not gonna call them roadways, streets, safer, more productive, but complete. So when this new program came out, I looked in, I tell the mayor every time you go through and there's boxes you check. And when you get to a certain box, it's like, don't submit. So one of the boxes has to do with having a complete streets policy, which we do not have. We have been involved in some complete streets issues that we are right now with the town of Greenberg, with the bike trail and the bike path of lanes on 119. We have an application to the state with that, which is, that's considered a step towards a complete street, because you're adding bicycles and pedestrian safe walkways that you don't have now, or ways that you don't have now. So what I did is I called first I went to the VOC and I said, what do you guys have? And only 2 of them had it, which really surprised me. And then I went to our planner and asked him what he had from anybody else. And so I provided you those copies, and they're pretty much the same. What ends up happening, so what you're supposed to do is, the way this works, when you are gonna do a project ourselves, or in conjunction with the county, or in conjunction with somebody else, you wanna rank, is the street a complete street? And there's a ranking system. There's a ranking system that gives points. So if there was competitive projects, you go through and you say, yes, that works, or even if somebody was doing a subdivision. So the first step we're gonna do in this is tomorrow I'm on a meeting with the county to find out more about the program, what's gonna be eligible, what are they looking for, because these are the types of things that usually come out, and they already have things they're looking for. What are they looking for, and then come back on our next meeting on the 14th with a report on that, whether this looks like it's something that we would be able to do with the county, but at the same time also come back to you with a draft policy for your consideration and adoption either way. Because if we're going to apply in September, we need that. If we're going to apply for another program, we need that. So that's the step and where we are at this point. I don't know if anybody went through this. with this type of funding, when they say complete streets, they mean complete streets. They don't mean, you know, a sidewalk with nowhere for bikes to be, a sidewalk with a road that's falling apart. They mean everything. The closest I think we've come here to quote unquote a complete streets when we did the Main Street project, because that was a combination of sidewalks, curbs, calming, which the calming out there is the bump outs.
Handicap.
All the handicap stuff, the paving was done, at the same time, even though the state did that. The lighting, improved the lighting, all of those things, and approved and improved. It has to do with economic development too, that we're improving a place where people want to be, where they feel safe, where they're going. So that's what this is all about. So I'll come back to you in the July meeting, and we'll move forward.
Thank you. Review the camp busing award.
So the ritual we do every year is put the camp busing out to bid. This is some document, and you've got to look at it sometime. You see that the bids were quite a bit apart. The Royal coaches who we've had over the last couple of years. So I usually go through and I ask the companies, you know, where their differences were, and the difference is that the National Express is really the White Plains Bus, old White Plains Bus Company. So they haven't bid with us in several years, and they're just a bigger company. They've got more buses, more employees, where Royal has to put people, special people on for us, so that the price goes up. But we're comfortable with National Express, and we're through with them. Actually, Chrissy was communicating with them on the schedule today, and we're recommending that they be awarded. That is approved. One thing we did add this year, I should add this, because it's something that we tried in the past, but the prices came in high. We had, last couple of years, we had alternates. Chrissy wanted to do from home busing, only in the village. And so there's a lot of benefit to it, but there's also a lot of complication, and it could get very expensive. So the last 2 years, we did an alternate to try to put it together, and the price was very high. It was just not practical. So we changed it this year a little bit, and we included it right in the shuttle bus price, where we're going to have a shuttle bus in the morning at White Plains Avenue Park, where parents can bring their children to there, drop them off there instead of school at the school, or the kids in the neighborhood. And we were going to, you were going to have to pay for that. But when the prices came in, it looked like it was it's affordable not to have people pay for it. And because of some of the changes of our access and drop off and pick up at the school, we want less cars there, we want less people there. So we're going to advance it as a free service for that area. And hopefully people take advantage of it. It's not really going to cost us anything more if they don't. It's a quarter of a bus for the whole year, basically. The price came out a lot better this year, I think, because the companies understood what they were bidding on this time, where in the past, I don't think they really understood. So just to point that out, it's a service that we've added, which would probably eventually grow to what Chrissy wants and still do.
Trustee Coffee, pick for you, Jim. Yes, sir. Trustee Lopez? Yes, sir. Second. Trustee Taylor? Review the multi-modal program.
This is kind of a dual discussion. The resolution has totally really to do with the multimodal program, but it's tied to a project that we have in the works that we're currently finalizing our numbers for and the contractors for, and we'll be back to you for authorization, final authorization award for those. And it has to do with paving, repaving and kind of rebuilding portions of North Everett's, as well as curbs, the curbs here in the harbor. So what this has to do with though is we had, I had a couple of years ago, went to the state and I got the $50,000 multimodal aid for a totally different project. The project was for an area in Chester and streets up in there a little bit. What happened is we were prepared to do paving there, and then we didn't have to because Con Ed came in and ripped the whole place up. So this multimodal money, which comes from the state senate and assembly, is very specific and very tedious, and just can't move it someplace else. So without going through a process. So over the last 6 months, it's taken at least that. I requested program change to have this go towards North Everett's because we knew we were doing North Everett's. North Everett's is actually really not going to cost you a whole lot of money in terms of the village itself, between this $50,000 with multimodal and our CHIPS money that we have saved up to do this large project. Because it says 340, it's probably going to end up being 360, 370, maybe a little bit more. So what this is doing is saying that they're approving it towards that project only, and the timeline, et cetera, et cetera.
Trustee Caulfield, okay for you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Lopez? Thank you, sir. Trustee Dory?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Brown?
Yes. Tony's actually meeting tomorrow with the potential curb contractor, which we're doing the curb contract. Oh, I should explain, because it's one of the mayor's favorite subjects. The curb contract and the milling and repaving and reconstruction of the road are all part of VOC contracts that we share with the other village officials, committees. Joint bidding.
We have a memo from the lawyer who's representing all 40 communities that are in Westchester and in Con Edison, that Con Ed services. As you know, all 40 municipalities joined together and hired one attorney to fight the rate increases. So he gave us a report on the stuff they submitted, and they brought in experts from all around the country to testify, so hopefully we'll make an event or an impact anyway.
Good. Just one comment on that.
Sure.
So when this idea first started, the mayor will attest to this, I think, because him and I were on the same page. It actually came up at a VOC meeting, the idea of doing this, and we weren't too hot on the idea. At that time, it was going to cost like $5,000 or $6,000 each, and it really looked like it was one of those exercises where we hire this attorney to go to the public hearing, and he says his spiel, and then the board says next. But I want to tell you, so first of all, now that it got cheaper, because everybody got involved, I think, except for one community, it got more affordable. But the information that these people have developed is remarkable. And it has, I know for a fact, because I've talked to some Con Ed people involved in this, it's opened their eyes. I mean, I know the county kind of did something on their own, but I think the VOC people, it's more than the VOC, it's the Westchester municipal officials people really, I think are going to end up saving people a lot of money.
We have a memo from the town of Greenberg supervisor he sent to our senator and assembly person and the governor about the sawmill. The town did a video of the Sawmill River, showing the structures and stuff like that. So, as you know, the village and the town for the last few years have been partnering to our highway departments to go in and clean out trees that cross the river and stuff like that. We're not allowed to disturb the banks of it or the depth or anything like that, but we're allowed to remove the trees that are blocking the flow. It's definitely been a lot better because the water isn't backing up in the trees and the garbage and stuff that it was in the river, so now the water's going faster, getting out of here, so it's definitely helping. So that's just a memo that he sent of a video that he took, so the town took of all the whole river.
Not quite sure why he used the word mapping,
Yeah.
because that's not what it is.
No.
but-
This is just an FYI, unless anybody has any objections, we're a interested agency. It means something that's close enough to a project in a different community, and the Village of Tarrytown Planning Board sent us a note. They want to redevelop 303
So,
South Broadway, I think you're figuring south and north, into residential from offices. If anybody had any objections, we would forward our objections to the Village of Tarrytown. I think it's a good idea, really. It's a good spot for that. Anybody have any-
Interesting.
Yeah, it's right, it's a beautiful view over the river, so we're good, so.
The traffic is gonna get very nice in there, because it is heavy now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that office building's always been full, so there's already traffic from there too, so if you plus and minus, you have to auction, so there. Should be, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one lane of street each way.
Won't affect me much.
Yeah.
Trustee Goff, any objections to that?
No, I don't have any objections. It's just, I think it's curious, though, because I'm thinking about 10%.
Yeah.
There's some way they gotta force it to raise the things. The average college graduate comes out looking at it. Meanwhile, they make just a tad much that they can't get into the other.
Right,
So, I mean, that's ridiculous.
we should increase the
You
percentage.
should make, at this point now, there's enough erosion. How many people can afford these erosion ponds?
It should be 20-25% or more.
It's 50%. The penthouse is expensive, and the rest of this, normal people.
I think that was
I don't
a
know.
sign.
Trustee Lopez, any? Okay. Trustee Gilbert, Trustee Crowell?
Good. Oh, absolutely.
Noted that the board has no objections to Terry Downs, gentlemen, and we have no objections to Terry Downs. As you know, the two remaining sisters that are in Mount Carmel are retiring, and they're moving out of the convent. So the church had 80 parishioners gathered for a meeting, and the archdiocese let it talk about what they want to do with the convent. So we'll definitely keep a closer eye on it. I gave you the documents. There was 10 people at a table, and we had these 3 questions to answer, which are on the last page. And then we started, when we wrote down all our answers, when they started to report on them, almost every table had the same answers to the questions. But the big picture is we're gonna have to watch it to see, it's in a residential zone. Now that it won't be residential, it's something that could still be allowed there. What they're talking about doing is making it a community center for just the parish. So it'll be for people inside the parish, and everybody knows the parish is a little bit bigger than the village, about the size of the school district, which is bigger than the village. And they want to make it to provide services to the community. Come in, and there would be a table to help you with immigration, there'd be a table to help you find medical care, there'd be a table to help you with, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be all community services that they want to do. So they're going to compile the report from that evening. And a lot of people at my table had questions, and we submitted those questions, so we'll see if we get some better answers. But when they come out with what they actually want to do more specifically, we'll have them come down, we'll have a conversation with them, and see what they're going to do. Because, there's no parking, there's a lot of stuff, so we have to, not that we're against helping the church and the community, obviously we'll favor that, and it sounds like a great idea, we just have to know what they want to do, so we'll keep you posted as soon as we get more information. we had talked about, performance evaluations and goals. And the police department does that now with their members. Once a year, the commissioner, jump in, once a year, the commissioner directs the sergeants to evaluate their men and their tours. And then they all come back with evaluations, and then the commissioner reviews them and brings the person in and talks to them, there you go, right, over there, senior detective. So everybody in the department gets, we want that done with all the departments. We can talk about how, why, when, where, kind of like, it could be done on a person's anniversary, so you don't have to do all 22 like the commissioner does at one time at the end of the year. So if you have one anniversary each month, then you can do your person or something like that. Or it could be yearly, it could be something, but we would like for your, employees to be evaluated. And the most important one is, especially ones that are new hires, that's the idea of probation period. Everybody's put on a yearly probation period, and we want to make sure, if I don't mind putting on Margie, I'm sure she went through that in the county, right? You were on probation, probably 40 years ago. Sort of pick on it, but the ones that are on probation, the idea of probation period is to watch them to make sure that they can do the job and they can handle the job and they fit into our community. So that's the idea of time where you're supposed to really evaluate them to make sure that they're doing the job and they can handle the job. If not, then we're able to release them easier than after they get off probation. So somehow if we could get together, probably with Steve and Commissioner and Administrator, see how they do it, and you guys can follow suit with that in your departments. And then we're gonna figure out how you guys get evaluated. That's gonna be the next step. We'll work on that, but we wanna start on the part about, at least you guys do your staff. That's something that should be yearly into your folders and stuff like that, so we can all keep a record of that. Any suggestions or ideas or thoughts or?
The county has a soap that they used to do it. Only the people into it.
Does it go for any thoughts or ideas?
Well, I've never been a great one, because I've always had a value. It's 20 years of it. And it's found it difficult. Some people take it well, some people get very defensive.
So if you're doing the right thing.
Well, most of the people I knew, I could just tell from the way they worked, whether they were doing the right thing. I don't need to sit, well, because it was drawn out, they had a whole form, and this person,
If I'm not mistaken, Commissioner, again, speaking for you, because you're the only one that does it, and I've known that for a long time, that you use it as a training tool.
Yep.
Right. So if
when
you
they
look at
know what-
something and you see a fault in somebody, you bring in and say, hey, you should be
You
doing
should
this.
be picking this up, or you should be doing that. And then at the end, I gave them a chance to evaluate me.
Can I do that?
Yeah. Anytime.
I just, to interject here a minute, I would suggest that it's not that we haven't done it, it's that it's not formal.
Right.
Basically, and I can tell you my experience here over the last 23 years has been the new people, but informal, and only stuff being done in writing when it was necessary to do it in writing, in lieu of disciplinary action, stuff like that. If it was a glaring problem, and I'll go back maybe 10 years ago, that I had a bunch of issues up here that I used to address on a daily basis, and that was done like an evaluation, but not a check the box type of thing like he has. So there are tools out there which we can do the check the box thing, which will make it more formal. That's not difficult.
It should be easier too, like.
That's not difficult.
Yeah. And I think if we have a record of it, then, God forbid, X amount of years down the road go by, we have a paper trail.
Right. No, what I'm saying to you is when where there has been an
Right.
issue, there is a record. There's just not that general, check the happy box or check the unhappy box. So, I mean, it's a good idea, it's a good tool to use.
Thoughts?
You know, in the public sector, I have always had evaluations and reviews done. I think the more important part though of it is the goals. Because if you're sitting down with somebody discussing what their goals are, you get a better feel at that time than you do in a day-to-day about, you know, what they'd like to achieve for themselves that you might not be aware of. Because, you know, sorry, Brian, I'm just gonna use your department because it's big enough. You know, this guy's on the back of a garbage truck, but he'd really like to be a machine operator, but nobody ever talked to him about that. He's just on the back of a garbage truck. Maybe it's a bad thing, I don't know, but it's a goal thing to me, is more important.
So during the evaluation, the employee talking to the department head would be asked, what do you see you would like to do, or?
What are your goals, your future goals?
To the employee.
The employee.
Eileen Fisher, right? What are your goals?
So it's a great idea. Obviously, the review is not only to review, it's to recognize the employee, their accomplishment throughout the years, and how they got to the position they are and where they want to go going forward. Before you start, obviously, something like that, you want to have some clear guidance, not only for the employee, but for the person who's going to do the review, to make sure that you understand that it's not personal, it's not going to like you, what have you. Here's your review. This is, for example, when you come to discipline, we met on this day, we talked about this, we agreed on X, that X has to be accomplished. Now we're talking again and we write it up and it's going to be Y. And from there, it went all the way to HR, for example, and to dismissal. So I employ that, something like that the tools will be clear and that it's clear guidance for the leaders of the departments on what to follow so that they won't come back with a, it's a personal, we don't like it. No, this is what when it happened, this is when we talk about it, and this is how we and I agree that we want to fix it. And yet, that was not fixed. This is why we're here. But definitely review is a great tool, and mainly is to recognize things well. Whether it's good or bad, to recognize them.
Commissioner, when you do your evaluations, at the end of the evaluation, do you assign a number to the evaluation?
We need a number to
A
it.
number, like the county does, they go from 1 to 5. On every single subject, they give you a number.
Yeah, we do two different ones that we do. Some are number ones that, like, does he meet these goals? 1, 2, does he excel in this?
So you do assign a number?
Yeah.
Just, these, like, they did the same schools from that reason. I never worked in the public sector. But I find that it helps, you really have to have a real, handle exactly what the job is that the person is supposed to do. Because you'd be surprised that, I'm, again, the highway department, but even more department, you run into these guys, when you hire them, you only get from them to, they're doing this too, they're doing that too. He's doing this, he's helping this guy, this guy. So it's a tough thing to try and say, well, is he cooperative? Oh, yeah, he's cooperative. Is he good at his doing? Well, he's not really good at doing this, he's not supposed to be. He's just helping. That's a tough thing to get when you're doing these type of evaluations. So you really have to identify and then, and then each person, you have to get a handle on what they're. Some guys thrive on jumping from different jobs, and do each one. They come into well. And you really need to identify that person can do that. This guy is great at what he does. He doesn't do so well when you push him to doing something else. You have to recognize that.
I'm I'm gonna jump in on that one if you don't mind. I've witnessed that in certain environments where they tap the knowledge of the person to do certain things, and they know their limitations, and they know what they're good at, so, for the most part, I think we're doing that pretty good. But
Well,
yes, that's a
that's what I'm
great, I'm
saying.
trying to say, it's a great point, yes.
That's what I'm saying, you gotta keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I've seen, witnessed that in all the departments where they say, you know, this guy excels doing this, so let him do that. You know, this guy excels doing that, let him do that. You know, try not to let the guy do that unless he has to, you know, because he's not, just can't do it that well, so. Yeah, I mean, so you can't, if you get somebody that really can't do something, you can't fault them on that.
Right, and you stuck them in, yeah, you stuck a pedigree around that good stuff. You gotta make sure you
Right,
put
so-
them where you belong.
Right, so if you're evaluating, you have to understand if you get a bad evaluation on that job, it's because of, not, you gotta take that into consideration when you're. Oh, good one.
And that's why that's important to do the evaluation, because that gives the person the opportunity to say, hey, I'm really not comfortable with doing that, but you asked me to do it. You know, great, now I won't ask you to do it again, because I know you're not comfortable with that. I'll avoid asking you, I'll ask somebody else.
I think what we should do is, the police department is the only department that does this. I experienced it, it worked, I was PBA president, no one had an issue with it, no one said why they evaluated me. And I think it worked great. And I think that we should have the department heads look at what the police department does first, and see if we can grow upon that. And I always got many evaluations. But no one's ever had an issue with it, I think it worked great, the process was perfect. That's the way I saw it for 20-something years, that's the way I remember.
Yeah, I was just, my experience has never been good, because I've always worked for the company.
Joe, I personally think that what private sectors do and what we do are different. The way we do is a lot different than the way, because we understand certain things. And we understand, like the police department understood, okay, it's not the detective's job to do this, so I wasn't, and if it was, I would be, okay, well, I never suppose I was doing it right. But if the other detective screwed up, he was told. So I think that we should look at the model of the police department, have the commissioner, let's make the chief do it. Have the chief show that the other department heads, this is what we have, and build upon that.
No, I'm just saying, that's it, which I just said.
Not everybody's gonna love the idea.
Well, we need to do it, so we need to start somewhere. I think starting with what the police department does is a good start, and grow upon that.
And the most important is the people on probation, that's the idea of probation.
Absolutely.
I mean, they have to be evaluated to make sure that they can save you.
I'm sure the water and highway and those guys would say, okay, listen, this doesn't work, you do with police, but we need to do this because guys jump on trucks, garbage, do this, do that. They weren't told, they were, like when I was with the town of Greenberg back when I was a kid, I was hired for the highway department. And it's a private issue, but my main man, Tony Bevan, when he lost, they put me on the garbage truck. I wasn't supposed to be on the garbage truck. So I took my boots and threw them and I quit. But anyway, but like what Joe was saying, you know, guys are supposed to be hired for one thing. I get it.
Commissioner, but he's still here, he was on the back end.
I was on Elmsford too.
It was a different
Board of
department,
Department
too.
also, with Roger Gurley.
Sorry, for sanitation.
The suggestion, why don't you bring stuff with you next meeting and give it to Mike, Commissioner, and give it to Mike to give it to us, and we'll look at it, and we'll talk about it at the next meeting, see how you do it, and we can have a little discussion with the guys that are here, please. Is that all right, everybody, we'll start there?
Mr. Mills, can I ask a question? On the employee handbook, is there anything in there that tells the employee that it's gonna be subject to
It
a
hits,
yearly evaluation?
it hits on, yes.
Thank you.
The next one is just really just an FYI, if you see the, I printed out, it's the 2025 local area median income by municipalities in Westchester County. And it shows you from one person, 2 people, 3 people, it goes all the way over to 8 people, and you can see where the village stands. It says for a one-person household, the median income is $85,100 in the village, and I think there's only a couple that are a little bit lower than us.
Mount Vernon, Sleepy Hollow,
Right.
Beachville,
And the ones that,
Portchester.
the ones that say NA is they're making
Yeah.
over $250,000 a year or something. I'm not showing, but it's just an interesting.
I think there's a lot of people cheating on their taxes. Because that's where this data comes from.
Yeah. 11, we're gonna move to executive session. During the middle of COVID, a resident wrote me, and I have to actually try to find the email, and made a suggestion of planting a tree somewhere in the village and put a little plaque underneath it in just in memory of all the people that died from COVID. I thought it was a good idea. I wanted to wait till COVID was over, which is really not still coming out, so. If you guys wanna do that, we'll just plant the tree someplace in the village, we'll find a spot, and then put a little plaque dedicated to all the people who lost their lives during the COVID from 2020, whatever it is. So if you guys favor that, start thinking where you wanna plant the tree, and we'll talk about that next round. Very nice little, monument to everybody who cares. And along with monuments, one thing we don't have is a Gold Star Mothers Memorial. Tarrytown has a very nice one, so I stole the idea from them. I was over there as a hospital doing a funeral detail, and I saw the one in Patriots Park in between Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown. We'll get you pictures of theirs. I would like to ask if we could do a small monument in front of our monument out here, which is the War Memorial, which is all the parents of the people that were also parents and stuff like that. So they have just it's a little monument, and you can put it like right in front of ours and say dedicated to the Gold Star Mothers and stuff like that. So we're about one of the only ones that don't have that also. But if you guys say yes, I'll get you some information on it, and we should do it in September on Gold Star Mothers Day. And it would be which is really close to the last few days in September, I forget, 28, 29, something like that. I'll get you more information for next meeting, you'll look at some of the ideas that I got, and I'll take it, you got the pictures of the one from Terry. Sorry? You agree? No, thank you. Thank you. We'll look into it more.
Yes.
We'll look into a little more, get you more information. Apologize, we forgot to add the VLC meeting that we just had on the agenda, so we'll go through that real quick. The first item was residential solar campaign. Hastings brought that up. We didn't join that campaign because we have so many solar applications. Almost every board meeting, as you see, we approve solar applications, so Hastings had this campaign to try and get more people to sign up for solar, so we always thought that we were doing really good. Number 2 is military banners. A lot of communities are doing them. Their question was, when we started talking about it, the people that do it, Ardsley, Tarrytown, Hastings, is that we were debating on when they put them up, because they all put them up at different times. Some put them up, went up too late, some put them up May and November for Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Some only did one, so Tarrytown's working on a policy when to do it. Some put them up just for Memorial Day, take them down. Some put them up for the 4th of July, some put them up Memorial Day, leave them to the 4th of July. So, not saying we were gonna do banners, but that was on the agenda, so I'm reporting on that. I will get you the information anyway. I asked for that from the other communities on what they do. But if you've seen them before, and Mr. Mills takes one out for his son in Portland, and they put a picture of the person and the history and name, correct? So, I mean, we'll look at it. If we decide to do it, it's one thing, but I'm just reporting because it's on the agenda. Mr. Mills asked for the couple of policies from the couple of villages for the complete streets, which you saw tonight. There was conversation about a debt and fund balance. As you know, in our budget, we do have a fund balance, and nobody had a debt balance. Policy. BMR property at Somerville Road is south on 9A. You go through Ardsley where it straightens out, and couple little condos on the right, some buildings on the left, just before the cemetery. It's right on Hastings border, so Greenberg wants to develop that. So Hastings had a problem about the traffic that will all be going south into Hastings. Tarrytown wants to do a retail zoning. They were hoping that all the villages could be on the same page to have the same rules on what you do in your retail zoning. Where they go, what they could do, sidewalk, cafes, pay for garbage, et cetera, et cetera. So they're just looking into different policies for retail zoning in Tarrytown. So after we get more information, we'll share it to you. We just started getting, Administrator and I used to get for many years, emails from Con Ed about turning off electricity to residents or businesses. So it stopped during COVID because they said they couldn't do that anymore. So we just started getting them again, so the other communities had never experienced those solar before. So, again, I explained to them what they are, and they say, we get a notice from Con Ed when they're gonna turn power off, but if it's already getting to us, it's really late with their bill, because, they give you a long time to not pay, but then for them to then still send them notices and get it to us. We share it with the building department and police department, so they're aware of, if there's any issues. And that was it for the VOC meeting. We're swapping some of the next rotation schedule of VOC meetings because there's 7 mayors and 5 of them are leaving at the end of the year. Myself and Carrie Down. Run for re-election, and obviously I did. But the other ones are not running for re-election. So we have a few more meetings left by the end of the year, so we're trying to get their meeting in during the month that they won't. So we're swapping positions. I did meet with, Lorena, you sparked my memory a minute ago. We had talked about the vehicle inspections. I met with, most of the department heads about those already, and, it sounded pretty harsh and bad when we presented it, but I think I softened it a little bit, so they calmed down a little bit. I met with Neil and Mike Wilson, and they're looking into it, because we already said the police department has a program already where they take their clipboard out and they check the boxes of the lights are bad, there's a dent here, and they circle it if there's a dent in the quarter panel or where it may be, so this way they know if something happened when it comes back, So they don't do it when it comes back in, they do it the next door does it. So if the next, I guess, the car is a dent, it's not on the sheet put ahead of them, then he did it, who did it, and they know who did it. So I suggested, let's maybe try to make it easier if we could put it on a tablet, instead of paper. A, it saves us the paper, and B, it's electronically, goes right into the system, and we would have it, and it's a lot easier, it's just boom, 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 boom on the tablet. So the two of them are going to get, going to get back to us on that. They're going to start with the PD and take theirs, because it's already there and working, and then we'll try and work it into the rest of the departments. And it's even after talking to those two guys, it's a lot easier than when I even talked to you guys about it, so don't panic yet. There was, and there was some very valid questions brought up, and I met with the department, so it's more than one driver throughout the day. Sometimes the truck will go out with 4 guys on it, and they're all 4 driving, so who's responsible for it? So, we got told in the worst where I told it to those guys, and yeah, that's fine, and just list all 4 people who drove the truck that day, and then somebody had to do that dent or something. It's gonna be a lot easier, those guys made it, gonna make it a lot easier. So when they get through the police department one, they're gonna present it to us and show us, and then we'll get together with the departments and work it out. But they seem to feel that it's gonna be very simple and easy, and definitely, since it is on a computer, then all the data will be held, and a lot easier to pull back. Get further. Anybody else got anything else?
I just want to say thank you, Brian, for putting the safety stripes on the trucks.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate it. I know there's still more to do, but I noticed and I appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn the work session? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? Ready?